Welcome to The Explainer. If you're a concerned parent, an educator, or honestly, just someone fascinated by human psychology, you are in the exact right place today. We're going to be exploring a deeply provocative paper by Dr. Faith Oniya titled The Architecture of Religious Docility. Basically, we're going to look really closely at Dr. Onya's research on how religious docility biologically and psychologically rewires the developing mind. As researchers, we're going to unpack the data together, neutrally examining the precise psychological mechanisms described in the text.
Our journey today maps out a pretty fascinating micro to macro progression. We'll start deep inside the brain's chemistry, move into childhood psychology, look at how communities reinforce these behaviors, explore family dynamics, and finally, zoom all the way out to examine the fate of global society.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Inside the believing brain. To really grasp how this happens, we have to start at the microscopic, neurological level.
Think of scientific inquiry like a muscle. It actually grows through resistance, right? Doubt is the engine of that growth, actively encouraging critical assessment. On the flip side, religious obedience acts a lot more like a rigid cast. In this framework, doubt isn't a tool for growth at all. Instead, it triggers an immediate threat response, demanding unquestioning submission. Dr. Oniya's research argues that religiosity actively engineers this kind of cognitive passivity.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract philosophical theory. Staggeringly, research involving over 63,000 participants across large-scale studies proves it. The data demonstrates that religious individuals are systematically less likely to engage logical processes and way less efficient at detecting reasoning conflicts. According to the text, they literally cannot see when their own beliefs contradict themselves.
So how does this actually happen inside your head? Well, the biological threat sequence is fascinating. Step 1, a critical question is asked. Step 2, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is the area governing your emotions, flares up. Step 3, the brain's conflict detection regions physically power down. And Step 4, analytical thinking completely shuts off. Basically, the brain registers a logical question as a genuine physical attack, and it shuts down its own analytical machinery just to protect the belief.
Section 2. The Childhood Trust Trap. Now, this neural rewiring doesn't just happen overnight by accident. It is systematically engineered during early development.
The research introduces a heavy but absolutely vital term here: epistemic infantilization. It describes the deliberate elevation of a pre-critical childhood relationship to authority into an adult norm for belief. Kids naturally trust adults, right? They lack experience. But the data points out that religious systems intentionally freeze cognitive development at this dependent, unquestioning stage.
The crucial takeaway is that when a system constantly praises having childlike faith as the ultimate ideal, it creates a permanent trap for the developing mind. The brain's growth gets stunted, questioning becomes impossible, and obedience becomes completely automatic. This stops critical thinking faculties from ever fully forming in the first place.
Which brings us to Section 3, mistaking limitation for virtue. If this stunts cognitive development, how do communities reinforce this passivity without people realizing what's happening to them?
It happens through something called cognitive closure. This is a mental state where questioning becomes so psychologically painful that the brain avoids it entirely. The markers are pretty clear: an intense need for immediate answers, deep discomfort with ambiguity, and closing off to new information. Think about it for a second. In many communities, asking the wrong question can literally mean losing your family, your friends, and your identity. The mind naturally chooses the emotional safety of obedience over logic because at the end of the day, it's a strict survival mechanism.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how communities disguise the psychological damage. They actively reframe these cognitive limitations as virtues. Blindness to logic is mirrored back to the individual as faith. The failure to think critically, that gets celebrated as spiritual maturity. And complete cognitive passivity is praised as holy obedience. The person doesn't feel cognitively disabled at all, they actually feel spiritually advanced.
I want to pause on this incredibly powerful conclusion directly from the source material. Religion occupies the part of the brain normally used for critical thinking and repurposes it for faith-based acceptance. Dr. Oniya makes it so clear here that the brain's natural analytical machinery is quite literally hijacked.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the family inheritance cycle. We have to ask, how does this framework of docility spread across time? The research calls this cognitive enslavement. It's the transgenerational inheritance of a mind trained not to think independently. For example, instead of teaching a child how to evaluate a complex moral dilemma, a family might simply punish them for asking why a rule exists. They aren't just transmitting specific beliefs, they are handing down a permanently docile cognitive architecture, conditioning that child to find comfort in obedience and sheer anxiety in autonomy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the 4 intergenerational patterns identified in the data. You have stable similar, child weakens, child strengthens, and the one I really want concerned parents to pay close attention to, child returns. This is when a child seems to gain independence, but then reverts to docility later in life, often after marriage or a major stressful life event. The underlying neural pathways of submission that were planted in childhood just lay dormant, waiting for a trigger to reactivate them.
Because of this generational loop, independent legacy building is essentially destroyed. The fundamental question of life shifts from a forward-looking, what lasting good can I create, to a backward-looking, did I follow the rules correctly? Families start obsessing over ancient traditional interpretations rather than creating practical, innovative solutions for their actual descendants.
And that brings us to our final lens, Section 5, a threat to global progress. What happens when millions of minds are trapped in this multi-generational cycle?
Well, I want to pose this question directly to you. What happens when an entire society loses its ability to question? It's a really sobering thought that anchors all this dense neurological and family data straight back to our shared global reality.
Let's move to and see how this builds in the real world. When logic and intuition conflict, data shows these individuals naturally default to intuition, which dominates their decision-making at roughly 80%. This failure to properly assess causal relationships causes catastrophic, systematic errors in judgment on a massive scale.
Here are the real-world stakes. The source text explicitly lists these exact modern global problems as being crippled by collective docility. Think about it. Climate change, public health, economic inequality, systemic injustice. They all require analytical thinking and a willingness to challenge authority. But large populations are systematically biased against evidence-based reasoning, halting progress dead in its tracks.
When the principle matters more than the consequences, the mind prioritizes abstract obedience over actual human survival. The research points out that these docile individuals will reject life-saving medical science and they'll support harmful public policies simply because their brain demands the emotional safety of obeying a perceived authority over tangible, real-world human outcomes.
This leads us to the grand tragedy, the ultimate cost. Mistaking lifelong cognitive enslavement for profound spiritual freedom. The mind, bound by religiosity, remains completely blind to its own enslavement. It literally doesn't know it's bound, because it has been fundamentally conditioned to believe that submission is the highest possible wisdom.
Based on all the incredible research we've explored today, I have to leave you with this. As parents and educators, will we choose the comfort of obedience, or will we step up and protect the resilient beauty of an independent mind? It is a powerful mandate from Dr. Oniya's work to safeguard our children's cognitive independence and build a genuinely better future. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer.